30 years. I gave them 30 years of my life, quietly, without demands, without ever asking for a single thank you. I cooked their meals, folded their laundry, rocked their babies to sleep while my own bones ached. I stayed silent when they forgot my birthday, smiled when they walked past me like I was furniture. I told myself, this is what mothers do. This is love. But one morning, over a cup of cold coffee and an even colder stare from my daughter-in-law, I heard the words that shattered everything. You should move out. It's time for you to live on your own. I looked at my son. He didn't say a word. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't been living. I had been surviving. What they didn't know was that pushing me out of that house would be the best gift they ever gave me. Evelyn Harper had always believed in the quiet strength of mothers. For 30 years, she lived in the same 2-story house in a quiet corner of Ohio, sharing the walls with her only son Daniel and his wife Samantha. The house was technically theirs now. Daniel and Samantha had both their names on the deed. Evelyn's name had never been added, not even in the early days when her savings helped pay off the final mortgage. But she never complained. That wasn't her way. At 68, Evelyn had become something like a shadow, present but unnoticed. She woke before anyone else, made breakfast, packed lunches, cleaned, folded, sorted, scrubbed. Her hands were worn, her knees ached in the winter, but she kept moving. That was her rhythm. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and lemon every morning because Evelyn made it so. But no one said, "Thank you." They only said, "Did we run out of oat milk?" Or, "Why is this towel still damp?" There was a photo wall in the living room. Evelyn had built it herself 2 decades ago. Pictures of birthdays, graduations, holidays, smiling faces, and colorful frames. But over the years, Evelyn's photo, just one, from Daniel's college graduation, had drifted slowly off-center. Someone had pushed it back to the edge. No one had noticed, or maybe they had and simply didn't care. She remembered a time when someone had cared. Howard was his name. A soft-spoken man with strong arms and a quiet wit, he had proposed to Evelyn 5 years after her husband passed away. They had been friends, grown closer, and when he asked her to marry him, she'd looked into his kind eyes and said no. "Daniel still needs me," she had whispered. "He's not ready to share me." Daniel never knew. He never asked. Evelyn kept that part of her life locked away like the old letters from Howard she stored in a wooden box at the bottom of her closet. He moved on, married someone else. Evelyn never did. Her life was Daniel, and so she stayed. She stayed through Samantha's sharp glares, through the unspoken rules of where she could sit, what she could touch, how often she could speak during dinner. She stayed because she believed that being a mother meant enduring discomfort for the sake of your children's peace. Then, a few years back, she had considered leaving. She had found a small 1-bedroom cottage on the edge of town, quaint, quiet, close to the library. She even took a tour. There were rose bushes outside and lace curtains inside. For the first time in years, she had imagined a space that was hers, just hers. But when she mentioned the idea to Daniel, he had grabbed her hand. "Mom, please don't. I don't want to worry about you out there alone. Just stay here with us. It gives me peace of mind." His voice trembled slightly, and Evelyn's heart cracked. She canceled the application that same evening. Now, looking back, she understood. It hadn't been about peace of mind. It had been about convenience. Her presence kept their life smooth. The baby had a babysitter. The house had a cleaner. Meals were cooked. Errands were run. No costs. No fuss. She was the oil that kept the machine running. Quiet, reliable, invisible. What she once thought was love, she now saw for what it was, utility. Not malice, perhaps. Not hatred, but certainly not love. She wasn't family anymore. She was infrastructure. One morning, Evelyn stood by the stove flipping pancakes. Daniel sat at the table scrolling through his phone. Samantha breezed through the kitchen without a word. Evelyn placed a plate in front of her son. He didn't look up. No, thank you, not even a nod. And just like that, something shifted. A silence inside her broke. Not with a bang, not with tears, just stillness. A realization she had never truly been seen. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding in the background of her own life. That afternoon, as the sun cast soft light through the kitchen window, Evelyn felt a pair of small arms wrapped tightly around her waist. Her granddaughter, Lily, 6 years old with messy curls and eyes too big for her face, held her close and whispered, "Grandma, you're the best person in the world." For a brief second, Evelyn forgot everything else. The ache in her joints, the indifference of her son, the cold glares from Samantha. None of it mattered. Lily's words wrapped around her like a warm shawl. Evelyn bent down, kissed the child's forehead, and smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, blinking back a tear. "You make this house feel like home." But the warmth didn't last long. Later that evening, Evelyn passed by Lily's bedroom and paused at the door. Inside, she heard Samantha's voice, gentle but edged. "Sweetheart, you know you shouldn't tell Grandma everything, okay? Sometimes she says things that aren't how Mommy and Daddy want you to think. So maybe don't go hugging her so much, all right?" Evelyn stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just the words. It was the fact that they were said so casually, as if discussing the weather. That night, Evelyn lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spin in slow circles. Her mind replayed Lily's tiny voice and Samantha's correction. Her heart broke not from the insult itself, but from the awareness that love in this house was conditional, regulated, and restricted. Even a child's affection was something to be controlled. In the days that followed, Evelyn noticed the subtle changes. Lily didn't run to her in the mornings anymore. Samantha made sure the child stayed busy during Evelyn's chore times. And when Evelyn offered to take Lily to the park, Daniel politely said, "We've got it covered, Mom." It was like watching a candle slowly lose its flame. Still, Evelyn tried to be useful. When Samantha talked about launching an online tea business, selling herbal blends and artisan infusions, Evelyn offered to help. She'd grown herbs in the backyard for years, had recipe books full of tea blends passed down from her grandmother. Samantha smiled, nodded, even took notes as Evelyn shared ideas. They spent hours experimenting, blending chamomile with orange peel, lavender with mint. Evelyn was thrilled. It had been years since she felt part of something meaningful. The website launched 6 weeks later. Evelyn refreshed the homepage with pride, but her name was nowhere to be found. The About Us section told the story of a young couple's dream turned into reality. Samantha's smiling face, Daniel's supportive quote, no mention of the woman who'd hand-stitched the custom tea bags or sourced the ingredients. Evelyn read every line twice, hoping she missed something. She hadn't. A hollow kind of silence followed. She didn't confront anyone. What was the point? The message had already been made clear. She was helpful, not important. And then came the moment that would change everything. One evening, Evelyn was folding laundry in the hallway when she heard voices coming from the partially closed door of the home office. Samantha's tone was sharp. "We can't keep doing this. She's always in the way. I need space to work. Lily needs her own room, and I'm tired of walking on eggshells." Daniel sighed. I know, but she's old, Sam. What do you want me to do?" "You know what I want." A pause. "I swear, if she lives another 5 years, I might lose my mind," Samantha said, almost laughing. And then Daniel's voice, quieter but just as cutting, "Yeah. I honestly don't know how I'm going to survive that long either." Evelyn didn't move. She didn't breathe. The warm pile of laundry in her hands suddenly felt ice cold. She backed away, slowly, each step heavier than the last. When she reached her room, she closed the door gently behind her and sat on the edge of her bed. Her hands trembled, but her face remained calm. In that moment, something inside her hardened. She thought of Howard, of the quiet cottage with rose bushes, of all the mornings she could have had to herself. She thought of Lily, who might one day grow up believing love came with conditions. She thought of herself, not the mother, not the helper, not the extra body in the house, but the woman who had once dared to dream of something more. And she knew this wasn't her home anymore. Evelyn stood at the sink rinsing strawberries for the birthday cake. It was Samantha's 40th. The kitchen was full of the scent of vanilla and lemon zest. Balloons floated in the corner, and a banner reading, "Happy Birthday, Sam," stretched across the wall. The house was unusually quiet. Daniel had taken Lily to her piano lesson. Samantha hovered nearby, pretending to arrange plates, but there was something brittle in the air. "Evelyn," Samantha said, voice tight, too formal. "Do you have a minute? I wanted to chat. Just us." Evelyn dried her hands and turned. "Of course." Samantha gestured toward the living room, where the afternoon light cast long shadows across the floor. They sat, not facing each other, like strangers on a park bench. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Samantha began, "about your happiness, about your independence." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, uncertain where this was going. Samantha continued, her voice light, overly rehearsed. "You've done so much for us over the years. Honestly, we're so grateful. But you deserve to enjoy your own life now. I found a lovely little apartment downtown. Quiet, close to the community center. Thought it might be perfect for you." The room seemed to hum with silence. Evelyn stared at her for a long moment. "You want me to move out?" Samantha blinked. "It's not like that. We just want what's best for everyone. You've given so much. Maybe it's time to do something for yourself." Evelyn's fingers clenched around the hem of her apron. "Does Daniel know about this?" Samantha smiled, soft, syrupy. It was his idea. And there it was. Not a suggestion, not a gentle nudge, a decision made without her. For a moment, Evelyn's mind ran in loops. Birthdays, hospital rooms, first steps, report cards. Her whole life laid out like old film reels, and all of it led here, to this couch, to this eviction wrapped in politeness. She could have fought, could have raised her voice, demanded respect. But instead, Evelyn nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "I'll go." Samantha blinked, surprised. "Really?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "If it makes everyone happy." But inside, something cracked. That night, in her small room tucked at the back of the house, Evelyn sat in the dark and folded clothes she no longer loved. Sweaters she'd worn for decades, scarves Lily had tugged on as a toddler. She packed with careful hands. No one came to check on her. No one asked if she needed help. Daniel didn't return until late. She heard his footsteps in the hallway, the soft murmur of Samantha's voice behind their closed bedroom door. No knock on hers, no hesitation. She was a decision already made. Evelyn placed a small wooden box into her suitcase. Howard's letters, tied with a pale blue ribbon. She added her tea journal, a recipe book, and one photo of Lily from a Christmas morning 3 years ago, the last time they'd all laughed together. Just once. The next morning, the house was still. She walked through it one last time. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain had already settled in her bones like old weather. She'd cried all she could cry in the empty years before this. Outside, Samantha stood by the car with a polite smile and keys in her hand. "I'll drive you," she offered. "No need," Evelyn said. "Maggie's coming." Indeed, Maggie's beat-up Subaru pulled into the driveway just then. Evelyn hugged her friend tightly, her grip the only thing anchoring her. "Let's get you out of here," Maggie whispered. As they pulled away, Evelyn glanced in the rearview mirror. Samantha waved once, then turned back toward the house. Daniel never came out. Evelyn watched the road ahead. "Maybe they'll regret it," she murmured. "Maybe they'll miss me when they realize how quiet the house feels." But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. The truth wasn't in their regret or lack of it. The truth was simpler, colder. She hadn't been a part of their lives for a long time. She'd just finally been told so. Evelyn spent her first night away from the house in Maggie's guest room, a modest, cozy space with lilac curtains and a single armchair by the window. The bed creaked when she moved, and the mattress was too soft, unfamiliar. But the silence, that was the strangest part. No muffled footsteps in the hallway, no running water from an upstairs shower, no refrigerator humming in the background like it used to at home. She didn't sleep much. Her mind wandered between disbelief and grief, between aching loneliness and an odd sense of freedom that she didn't quite know what to do with. She reached for her phone around midnight and stared at the dark screen before opening her messaging app. "Good night, my little star. Sweet dreams. Grandma loves you." She hit send. No reply came. The next morning, she made tea in Maggie's kitchen. The counter was cluttered and the mugs didn't match. It felt oddly comforting, imperfect, alive. Maggie gave her space, didn't hover or fuss, just handed her a warm cup and sat in quiet company. That night, Evelyn sent another message. "Sleep well, Lily. Remember you are brave, kind, and so loved. Grandma." Again, no reply, not even a read receipt. She told herself maybe Samantha had taken Lily's tablet away. Maybe they were busy. Maybe it just slipped through the cracks. But by the fourth night, it became harder to believe in those excuses. Silence, she realized, wasn't just absence. It was a decision. A week passed. 7 days of unanswered messages. 7 days of wondering if Lily even asked where she was. Then, one evening, her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Her heart skipped. She unlocked the phone with trembling hands and opened the message. "Hey, Mom. I'm sorry things ended the way they did. The house feels weird without you. No dinner ready when I get home. Samantha's swamped with work and Lily's been eating cereal all week. I guess we didn't realize how much you did until now. Hope you're okay." Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time. There was no mention of missing her. No, "I love you." No, "I'm sorry we hurt you." Just an acknowledgement of her absence in the context of chores undone, routines disrupted. It wasn't grief. It was inconvenience. A cold wave washed over her. She opened the message thread and scrolled upward, reading the last few months of conversations. Most of them were practical. Reminders about school pickups, grocery lists, doctor appointments. Very few were affectionate. Fewer still included her name. And then she realized they hadn't lost a mother. They'd lost a service. With a heavy breath, she selected all the old messages and hit delete conversation. Then she opened Daniel's contact profile, pressed block, and set her phone down gently on the table. Maggie watched her from across the room, silent, sensing the shift. Evelyn's expression was calm, but her fingers trembled slightly around her teacup. "You all right?" Maggie asked softly. Evelyn nodded. "I think, for the first time in a long while, I'm starting to be." The days that followed were quiet but not lonely. Evelyn began going on walks with Maggie in the early morning, sipping coffee from paper cups and watching the town wake up. She took long baths in the afternoon and sat by the window reading into the evening. She breathed for once, without the weight of someone else's expectations. And yet, every night, her fingers still hovered over the messaging app. Out of habit, out of hope. But she didn't send another message. That tether had been cut. Not by her, but by the silence that grew in response. She thought of Lily constantly, wondered what Samantha told her, wondered if she missed her bedtime stories, the way Evelyn used to trace stars on her back and whisper poems before sleep. But she also knew children follow the lead of the adults around them. If no one mentioned Grandma, Lily would learn to forget. And perhaps that was the most brutal betrayal of all. Not erasure by cruelty, but by quiet, systematic dismissal. One afternoon, Evelyn took out her journal and began writing. Not to anyone, not for anyone, just writing. She wrote about the first time she held Daniel, the moment he wrapped his tiny fingers around hers. She wrote about the pride in his eyes when he learned to ride a bike, the first time he said, "I love you," after scraping his knee. She wrote about Samantha's wedding day, how she had stayed up the night before, steaming the dress and tying ribbon to the chairs. And then she wrote about the dinner table, the quiet ones, the ones where no one spoke. And yet Evelyn cleaned up afterward anyway. She wrote about the time she got sick and no one noticed she hadn't come downstairs for hours. The time she made a birthday cake for herself because no one else remembered. The words spilled out page after page until her hand cramped. When she finished, she closed the journal gently. They hadn't remembered her in their house, but she would remember herself. That night, for the first time in weeks, she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't look at the messages or wait for a reply that wouldn't come. Instead, she lit a candle beside her bed and whispered a prayer for her own peace. She was no longer hoping to be missed. She was learning to be whole, on her own. Maggie's house sat at the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac, shaded by old oak trees that creaked in the wind like voices from another time. The house was small but filled with life. Books stacked in corners, postcards from years of travel pinned to corkboards, and handmade pottery lining open shelves. It was nothing like Evelyn's previous home. No marble countertops, no color-coordinated furniture. But here, everything felt intentional. Maggie had lived alone for most of her adult life. No husband, no children. People used to whisper about it, Evelyn remembered. They called her the eccentric one, the woman who traveled to Italy alone in her 40s and once shaved her head on a dare. But sitting across from her now, Evelyn saw something that she hadn't recognized in years. Peace, not the kind born from stillness, but from fullness. Maggie radiated it. Each morning, they drank coffee on the porch, wrapped in thick shawls against the chill. Maggie told stories of her youth, of late-night jazz bars and near-death kayak adventures. Evelyn listened, laughing more than she had in years. And in the pauses, Evelyn began to share too. Slowly at first, like testing the temperature of water, but then fully, letting the words tumble out. It was in these moments that Evelyn began to understand something deeply uncomfortable. Maggie, with her solitary life, was happier than Evelyn had ever been in her full house. One evening after dinner, Maggie brought out a small wooden box from a drawer in her bedroom. "I have something for you," she said, setting it gently on the table. Evelyn tilted her head. "What is it?" Maggie opened the lid. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a soft blue silk scarf. Evelyn gasped. "I gave you this on my wedding day," she whispered, her fingers brushing the fabric as if it might dissolve. "I thought it was lost, or that Samantha had thrown it away." Maggie smiled gently. "You left it behind the day after the wedding. I kept it. I figured you'd want it back someday." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes before she could stop them. She had searched for that scarf for weeks after the wedding, thinking it had been discarded in one of the many cleanouts Samantha conducted without asking. The scarf had been her mother's. She'd worn it around her neck the day Evelyn left for college, waving from the porch. Evelyn clutched it now like it was air. I thought I'd lost all the things that meant something to me," she said softly. Maggie reached across the table, her touch warm and steady. "You didn't lose them. You just gave them to people who didn't know what they were worth." That night, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror with the scarf draped over her shoulders. Her reflection startled her. She looked older than she remembered, softer around the eyes, lines deeper around her mouth. But the scarf brought back a version of herself she thought had disappeared. Not the mother, not the maid, not the forgotten woman in the hallway, just Evelyn, the woman who once dreamed, once danced, once believed in more. She began journaling again that night, but differently this time. Not about regrets, about who she still was, about what she could be. She wrote about the scarf, about Maggie, about laughter over mismatched dishes and late-night reruns of old comedies. She wrote about the way healing didn't roar, it whispered. And in that writing, Evelyn came to a conclusion that felt both liberating and painful. She had given her life to motherhood, expecting it would mean something sacred. But the truth was, motherhood didn't guarantee love. Sacrifice didn't guarantee gratitude, and being needed wasn't the same as being wanted. Watching Maggie live without any of the trappings society told women they needed, a husband, children, a legacy, Evelyn saw something radical. Maggie hadn't been forgotten. She had simply never allowed herself to be erased. For the first time, Evelyn wondered if maybe she still had time to choose herself, too. It had been 3 weeks since Evelyn left Daniel's house. The edges of her grief were no longer sharp, but they hadn't dulled either. They sat quietly under her skin, surfacing during the quietest moments, when the kettle whistled or when she folded her scarf a certain way. That afternoon, Evelyn decided to take a walk alone. Maggie offered to come, but Evelyn shook her head gently. "I need some air, by myself." She wandered down the winding paths of the neighborhood, eventually ending up near the old supermarket she used to shop at every Wednesday morning. Out of habit, her feet carried her toward the entrance. She stepped inside and was immediately greeted by the familiar scent of fresh bread and the chill of the refrigerated aisles. It was comforting, in a strange way, like visiting a ghost town made of routine. She walked slowly, her fingers grazing cans of soup, boxes of cereal, and tea she no longer needed to buy for anyone else. She rounded the corner near the produce section and froze. Lily. Her granddaughter stood just feet away, wearing a yellow raincoat with polka dots and holding a small basket. She was taller than Evelyn remembered, her curls a little longer. She looked up, speaking excitedly to someone out of sight. Evelyn's heart stopped. It felt like a miracle, like the universe had decided to give her one moment back. She stepped forward slowly, careful not to startle the child. "Lily," she said softly, voice catching. The little girl looked at her, puzzled. There was no flicker of recognition, no widening of eyes, no smile, no rush into her arms, just a blank stare. Before Evelyn could speak again, a voice called out from behind Lily, "Sweetheart, don't wander too far." Evelyn turned and saw her. Patricia, Samantha's mother, the other grandmother. She walked over, gently placing a hand on Lily's shoulder, and smiled down at her. "Come on, dear, let's find those apples." And then it happened. Lily looked up at her and said, loud and clear, "Okay, Grandma. Grandma." Evelyn felt the word punch the air from her lungs. Her knees buckled slightly, but she steadied herself against a nearby shelf. She watched them walk away together, hand in hand. Lily skipped. Patricia laughed softly. Evelyn remained frozen for what felt like hours, though it was only seconds. The fluorescent lights above flickered. The hum of the freezer units droned on. She didn't cry there, not in the store. She held it in, finished walking through the rest of the aisles with empty hands, and left without buying anything. But the storm inside her had already begun. By the time she reached the sidewalk, tears blurred her vision. She sat on a bench outside the store and buried her face in her hands. She wasn't just out of their house, she'd been replaced. In Lily's world, she no longer existed. Patricia was now Grandma. Evelyn had been erased, not with malice, but with time, silence, and the permission of adults who chose not to speak her name. The ache wasn't sharp, it was hollow, the kind of ache that stretches across the ribs and lingers in the spaces between heartbeats. She had held Lily's tiny body against her chest during colic fits, sung lullabies into her ear, made her pancakes shaped like animals, built pillow forts, and whispered stories long after bedtime. And now, nothing. She didn't even exist in the child's memory. There was no confrontation, no dramatic reunion, just absence, just being forgotten. The wind picked up. Evelyn pulled her scarf tighter around her shoulders and closed her eyes. A memory flashed, one from just a year ago. Lily running across the yard with a drawing in her hand. "Grandma, look, I made us." two stick figures holding hands with matching gray hair. She wondered if that picture still existed, or if it had been thrown away like so many other traces of her life there. She didn't know what hurt more, the idea that Lily had forgotten her, or that Daniel and Samantha had allowed it to happen. It would have been easy to tell Lily the truth, to say Grandma was resting or living somewhere else, or even to let her call, but they hadn't. They'd erased Evelyn from their story, cleanly, completely. She sat on that bench until the cold made her fingertips ache. Then slowly, she stood up and began the walk home. She didn't look back. Evelyn sat at Maggie's kitchen table with a pen in one hand and her old faded legal folder in the other. The folder had once contained her will, the original version written over a decade ago when Daniel first became a father. Back then, she had appointed him as sole beneficiary. Everything she had, the modest savings from her part-time librarian work, the life insurance from her late husband, the house she had helped Daniel pay off, even her few pieces of jewelry. Every bit of it had been assigned to him and his family. She remembered feeling proud the day she signed it, like she was doing what mothers were supposed to do, ensure her child would be safe, even when she was gone. Now she stared at the same paper and felt nothing. Actually, that wasn't quite true. She felt clarity, a kind of quiet resolution that hummed beneath her ribs. There was no anger left, not even grief, just a firm understanding that love, when taken for granted, becomes entitlement, and she refused to feed that any longer. With steady hands, she opened a new template online and began drafting a new will. This time, her eyes didn't flicker toward Daniel's name. She filled in the beneficiary space with something entirely different. The Women's Support Alliance of Franklin County, a nonprofit dedicated to aiding elderly women living alone, women like her, women like Maggie, and women like the one she hadn't seen in 50 years. 2 days later, Evelyn printed the completed documents, signed them, and asked Maggie to come with her to the local support center to submit the paperwork officially. The building was modest but clean, with lavender-painted walls and shelves full of donation forms, pamphlets, and hand-knitted scarves for those in need. The receptionist welcomed them warmly and guided them to a small conference room. As Maggie chatted with the staff, Evelyn wandered toward the adjacent library corner. It was filled with biographies, old magazines, and scrapbooks donated by long-forgotten volunteers. She was about to return to her seat when she heard a familiar voice, thin, gravelly, but unmistakable. Evelyn Harper? She turned. Standing at the door was a woman with silver hair cut into a neat bob, thick-rimmed glasses perched on a narrow nose, and a cane in one hand. "Catherine Bell," Evelyn said slowly, blinking in disbelief. "From Miss Langley's literature class." Catherine chuckled. "I haven't heard that name or that teacher in decades." They stared at each other for a moment before embracing, the kind of hug that surprised them both with how much they still remembered. They hadn't seen each other since graduation day. Back then, they'd shared poetry books, dance recitals, and secret crushes. Now, they shared something heavier. "I didn't know you were here," Evelyn said as they sat across from each other at a small table in the lobby. Catherine smiled, but her eyes were tired. "I've been volunteering part-time, after everything. This place saved me." "Everything?" Catherine looked down, fiddling with the silver ring on her finger. "My son's wife, my daughter-in-law, accused me of falsifying medical documents to get access to their house. She said I was manipulating him into letting me stay with them." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "Was it true?" "No," Catherine said simply, but she was louder. "And when people are loud enough, the truth doesn't matter much. My son didn't defend me, said he didn't want to take sides. So I left." They sat in silence for a while. Then Evelyn whispered, "I thought it was just me." Catherine looked up. "No, darling, it's all of us." They spoke for hours after that. Catherine told her about other women who had been quietly erased, widows pushed out by new families, grandmothers replaced, caretakers treated as burdens. Their stories were different, but the ending was the same: love misused, sacrifice forgotten. It was there, in that little center painted lavender, that Evelyn saw herself not as a tragedy, but as a pattern. A woman caught in a cycle far too many others had suffered through in silence. That night, back at Maggie's, Evelyn opened her journal again, but this time, she didn't write about pain. She wrote about power. About the power of recognizing your own worth even after others had devalued it, about the power of community among forgotten women, about the dignity in choosing peace over bitterness, and she ended her entry with a simple line: "I am not alone. I am not a mistake. I am a mirror, and there are so many reflections just like me." A week after meeting Catherine, Evelyn received a phone call from the director of the Women's Support Alliance. The woman's voice was kind, laced with hesitation, but also hope. "We're holding a small conference next Saturday," she explained. "It's focused on the silent struggles of older women in domestic spaces, those who've been overlooked, displaced, or made invisible in their own families." Evelyn sat at Maggie's table, stirring her tea slowly. "We'd be honored," the director continued, "if you would speak, share your story. Nothing formal, just whatever you feel comfortable saying." At first, Evelyn hesitated. She had lived most of her life in the background. Speaking aloud about her pain in front of strangers felt like undressing in public. But then she remembered Catherine's quiet strength and the countless women like her who had no voice at all. "I'll do it," she said softly. The day of the event, Evelyn dressed simply: gray slacks, a soft blue blouse, the scarf Maggie had returned to her gently wrapped around her neck. She didn't wear makeup, didn't pin her hair. She wanted to look like herself, the version she had long hidden. The conference room was modest, holding no more than 50 chairs. The women seated inside varied in age and appearance, some with walkers, some in vibrant lipstick, others clasping worn purses with hands that had seen lifetimes. When Evelyn's name was called, she walked slowly to the podium. No fanfare, just footsteps and silence. She looked out at the faces in front of her, then down at her hands. She didn't hold notes. She didn't need them. "I used to think," she began, voice steady and soft, "that love meant being useful." Heads turned. Conversations hushed. "I believed," she continued, "that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, gave enough, my family would never forget me, that the love I poured into them would come back like a tide, that I'd matter just for being there." A woman in the third row pressed a tissue to her cheek. Evelyn went on, weaving her life into a quiet tapestry of sacrifice. Raising her son alone, moving in to help when he started his family, cooking, cleaning, loving without expectation. She told them about the couch conversation, the forced goodbye, the silence that followed. "I wasn't hated," she said. "I was replaced. Quietly, systematically, by people I had once believed would carry my memory in their bones." No bitterness colored her words. Her voice never rose. She didn't accuse. She simply told the truth. And by the end, the room was still, save for the sounds of gentle weeping. A woman stood up in the back. "You're telling my story," she whispered. Another woman raised her hand. "Mine too." By the time Evelyn stepped down from the podium, the air felt electric. Dozens of strangers, previously invisible to each other, were now bound by a shared thread. What Evelyn didn't know, what no one in the room realized, was that one of the volunteers working tech in the corner had recorded her speech. Not for malice, not for exploitation, just because something about her voice felt important. The volunteer, a college student studying social work, posted a short clip on her personal account that night. By morning, it had been shared over 10,000 times. Within days, it went viral. People heard Evelyn's voice, gentle, unwavering, real, and something inside them stirred. They didn't know her name, The clip had no identifying tags. She was simply labeled Anonymous Grandmother Women's Support Conference. But it didn't matter. In her quiet tone, people heard their own mothers, their own grandmothers. They saw the reflection of women they had loved and perhaps failed to love enough. Evelyn found out about the video a week later when Maggie handed her a tablet with teary eyes. "You need to see this," she whispered. Evelyn watched herself on screen, smaller, older, softer than she imagined, but undeniably her. Thousands of comments flooded the post. "I miss my grandma. I wish I had listened more. This made me call my mom. I never knew how invisible she felt. I do now." Evelyn scrolled slowly, a hand over her mouth, and then she laughed. A small, stunned, delighted laugh. "I've never gone viral before," she said. Maggie wiped a tear. "You've never been heard before. That's different." That night, Evelyn stood at the window, watching the stars blink against the deep blue sky. She didn't need her name in the headlines, didn't need flowers or apologies. She had spoken her truth. And someone, no, thousands of someones had listened. She touched the scarf at her neck, closed her eyes, and smiled. "Finally," she whispered, "I was heard. And I didn't even need to be known." The lake shimmered like glass in the early morning light. Birds skimmed the surface, and the air carried the soft scent of pine and warm earth. It was here, beside this peaceful shoreline, that Evelyn opened her tea shop. She named it the Quiet Cup. It was a narrow cottage-style building with a porch swing out front, nestled under old willow trees whose branches touched the water. Inside, mismatched chairs circled round wooden tables. There were books stacked in corners, classical music drifting from hidden speakers, and the scent of lavender and chamomile always dancing through the air. It wasn't grand. It wasn't even profitable at first, but it was hers. She served tea in hand-painted cups. Every blend had a name she chose carefully. Second Spring, Unspoken Thanks, Memory Lane. She created the blends herself using herbs grown in a little garden behind the shop, the same way she had once done in the Harper kitchen, unacknowledged. The customers trickled in slowly, mostly older women at first, some with walkers, others with the kind of grief Evelyn recognized in their eyes. Some came for tea, others for silence. All were welcome. Evelyn kept a notebook behind the counter where she wrote their names, what they liked, and one thing they mentioned about their past. She memorized the entries like they were holy verses. She didn't just serve tea, she served belonging. Soon, the tea shop became more than a business. It became a haven. Each Thursday afternoon, she hosted a reading circle, not the loud kind with debates and notes and margins, but a quiet kind. They read poetry, letters, even diary entries long buried in drawers. Some cried, some laughed. Most simply sat with the comfort of being seen. On Saturdays, they played music. Maggie brought her harmonica, and another regular named June plucked a ukulele with arthritic fingers that still remembered joy. Evelyn never sang, but she swayed gently behind the counter, humming. Then, one rainy Wednesday, a girl in her early 20s entered the shop. She had messy hair under a knit cap, a satchel full of books, and a gaze that flickered like someone used to being overlooked. "Hi," she said, stepping up to the counter. "Is it okay if I study here?" Evelyn smiled. "Of course. First cups on the house?" The girl nodded, setting up her laptop at the corner table near the window. She visited again the next day, then the next. She tried different teas, scribbled notes in a thick journal, and occasionally paused to watch Evelyn move behind the counter. On her fourth visit, she lingered after closing time. "Can I ask you something?" she said, voice low. Evelyn looked up from stacking cups. "I think I've heard your voice before," the girl said. "On a video, a speech from some women's conference." Evelyn's hands paused. "There are many voices like mine." "No," the girl said firmly. "It was you. You said, you thought love meant being useful. You said being needed isn't the same as being wanted. I've never forgotten that." Evelyn felt her chest tighten, not in fear, but in awe. "What's your name?" she asked. "Lucy," the girl replied. "I'm a sociology student. I've been researching care and generational neglect. Your speech changed how I see everything." Evelyn nodded, unsure what to say. "I want to volunteer here," Lucy said quickly. "Not for credit, just to be part of this." And so Lucy joined. She helped tidy the shelves, brew tea, and learned each customer's favorite blend by heart. One afternoon, while they were repotting rosemary by the window, Lucy said softly, "My grandma died 2 years ago. My mom never forgave her for something she wouldn't explain. They didn't speak for the last decade of her life." Evelyn paused, hands deep in soil. "She wrote letters," Lucy continued, voice cracking. "Hundreds of them. My mom never opened a single one. I found them after she passed. It destroyed me." Evelyn didn't offer comfort right away. She simply reached out and squeezed Lucy's hand. "You're not alone," she whispered. "None of us are." That night, Evelyn sat by the lake after closing. She thought about Daniel, about Lily, about all the things she had once tried to hold onto with bleeding hands. She thought about her former home, not the structure, but the identity she had lost inside it. Then she looked at the small tea shop behind her, lit warmly, humming with gentle life. This was a different kind of home, one she had built not out of duty, but from healing. And this time, she wasn't invisible. By late autumn, the Quiet Cup had become something of a legend among the lakeside towns. No ads were run, no social media accounts posted updates, yet the tables were rarely empty. Word had spread in a way that only real peace could. Through whispers, through stories shared quietly over tea. People came for different reasons. A woman who had just lost her husband sat each Tuesday by the window, sipping ginger hibiscus, saying nothing for hours. A retired teacher who'd never married brought crossword puzzles and a cat named Bert. Veterans, widows, single fathers, young women, some with tears in their eyes, others just tired. All came, all stayed. They said there was something in the air, something healing. Lucy was a near constant presence, tending the tea garden and chatting with guests like she'd been there forever. Evelyn let her take over the Saturday blends, trusting her choices completely. They worked in quiet synchronicity. Two women from different generations who had both been touched by silence and who now found solace in creating something gentle. And yet, through it all, Evelyn rarely spoke about her past, even when asked, by a customer who recognized the voice from the viral video or by someone who sensed the story behind her stillness, she always smiled and deflected. "It's all behind me," she'd say. "What matters is what we build next." But she knew the past wasn't gone. It was simply folded, like an old letter, stored in the back of her mind. Sometimes it fluttered open. One Thursday morning, the bell above the front door chimed as it always did. Evelyn looked up from her ledger and froze. Daniel stood just inside the doorway, holding his breath as if unsure whether to move forward or leave. He looked older, more tired. His hair had grayed more than she expected, and there were new lines on his forehead. He wore a coat too thin for the weather and held a small paper bag in one hand. His eyes searched the shop slowly, scanning the bookshelves, the plants, the tea counter, until they landed on her. She didn't flinch. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lucy, sensing the sudden stillness, glanced up from the sink. Evelyn gave her a small nod. "It's okay." Daniel stepped forward slowly, almost cautiously, as if afraid the floor might collapse beneath him. He didn't say a word. He didn't wave. He simply sat at the table closest to the window, the one Lily used to sit beside during those long-ago breakfasts, and placed the paper bag in front of him. Evelyn didn't move from behind the counter. She poured hot water into a ceramic pot and prepared a blend of chamomile and cinnamon. Her hands didn't tremble. She knew exactly what she was doing. She watched him through the steam of the kettle. Daniel didn't fidget. He didn't look around nervously. He just waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. Lucy brought him water with a gentle smile. He thanked her softly. 20 minutes. And then, without a word, Daniel stood up, picked up the paper bag, and walked to the door. Just before leaving, he turned back, just a glance, and his eyes met Evelyn's. There was no apology in them, no plea, only recognition. Evelyn held his gaze, and in that moment something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not rage, just silence. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when all that's left is wreckage and the slow understanding that not everything can be rebuilt. Then he turned and left. Lucy approached after he was gone. "Do you want me to find out who he was?" she asked gently. Evelyn shook her head. "I know." She didn't explain, didn't need to. Later, after closing, she walked to the table where Daniel had sat. A folded note lay beneath the water glass. She didn't open it. She placed it in the donation jar marked "Stories We Carry," where customers sometimes left poems, confessions, or unsent letters. Not because she didn't care, but because the story no longer belonged to her alone. She walked to the back of the shop and stood by the lake, the sun casting golden streaks across the water. She breathed in. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for a text, for a call, for someone to say sorry. She wasn't waiting to be heard. She wasn't waiting to be known. She was simply still. Samantha had always been pragmatic. She didn't believe in superstition, didn't entertain guilt unless it served a practical purpose. But something changed after the illness. It came suddenly, a respiratory infection that settled deep in her chest. 2 weeks in the hospital, oxygen tubes, silence at night filled only by machines. And in those nights, she began to dream, not of death, but of absence, of a house too quiet, a table missing its corners, a child's voice asking, "Where's Grandma?" When she returned home, everything felt colder. Daniel was distant, weighed down by unspoken memories. Lily had grown more withdrawn, spending hours drawing faces she never named. The house was spotless, lifeless. One evening, Samantha opened a drawer in the hallway and found a hand towel embroidered with lilac flowers. Evelyn's touch. She sat on the floor and cried. It was the first time she allowed herself to feel anything real about the woman she'd forced out. Days passed. The weight in her chest wasn't just physical anymore. It lived in her bones. Regret, like an old photograph, resurfaced constantly. No matter where she turned, she saw Evelyn in the way Lily still whispered bedtime songs under her breath, in the cinnamon scent that lingered in the cupboard, in the quiet corners that used to hold warmth. "I need to find her," Samantha told Daniel one morning. He didn't respond, so she packed a small bag, left Lily with her mother, and began driving. She checked every number in her phone, called old neighbors, asked around at community centers. Some remembered Evelyn fondly, others didn't know where she had gone. "She disappeared," one woman said, "just like she lived, without asking for anything." After days of searching, Samantha found herself in a lakeside town. It wasn't planned. She had stopped for gas, saw a flyer pinned to the station wall. The quiet cup, tea, solace, stories. Just breathe. She had laughed bitterly. Just breathe? That's exactly what had failed her in that hospital bed. Still, something about the name tugged at her. She followed the directions, winding through pine-lined roads until the small cottage tea shop came into view. The sign swayed gently in the wind. The windows glowed warm against the cold. A bell chimed as she entered. Inside, the scent of lavender and something citrusy wrapped around her like a memory. She was greeted by a young woman, maybe in her 20s, who smiled and gestured toward the menu. "I'll bring it to your table," the girl said kindly. "You look like you need something calming." Samantha sat at a corner table, trying to still her hands. A few moments later, a woman approached with a tray. She wore a green apron, her silver hair tied back under a scarf, soft lines around her eyes. Samantha didn't recognize her. "Your tea," the woman said gently, setting the cup down. "Chamomile and orange peel. It helps with breathing." Samantha blinked. "Thank you," she murmured. Then, unsure why, she asked, "Do you have a moment?" The woman nodded and sat across from her. "I'm looking for someone," Samantha said, tracing the rim of her cup. "She used to live with us, helped raise my daughter, my mother-in-law." The woman listened, saying nothing. "I told her to leave," Samantha continued, "said it was for her own good, space, independence, the usual lies we tell ourselves when we want someone gone." She laughed bitterly. She was the kind of woman who never asked for anything. She just gave, always. I thought I was doing her a favor. I realize now I was erasing her. The woman across from her tilted her head slightly. "Do you miss her?" "I do," Samantha whispered. "I think my daughter does too, though she doesn't know it. And my husband, he'll never say it, but I see it in his eyes." A long pause. "She used to wear this scarf," Samantha added. "Blue silk, always tied at the neck. I hated it back then. Now I'd give anything to see it again." The woman smiled softly. "What would you say to her if you could?" Samantha didn't hesitate. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought being in control made me strong, but I was just scared of sharing love." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was wrong about everything." The woman reached forward, resting her hand lightly over Samantha's. "If she's out there," she said gently, "I think she already forgave you." Samantha's breath hitched. "How do you know?" "Because some people forgive long before they're asked," the woman said, her eyes warm but unreadable. "And because some mothers never stop loving, even when they've been forgotten." The teacup trembled slightly in Samantha's grip. "I wish I'd said it sooner," she whispered. The woman stood slowly, lifting the empty tray. "Sometimes," she said, "saying it now is still enough." She walked away, her steps soft across the wooden floor. Samantha sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from her, unsure why her chest felt lighter and heavier all at once. She never asked the woman's name. She didn't need to. A month after Samantha's visit, a cream-colored envelope arrived at the Women's Support Alliance. It was addressed in neat, slanted handwriting to the founder of the Evelyn Harper Legacy Fund. Inside was a letter. It wasn't long, but it was heavy, full of pauses, scratched out lines, rewritten sentences that bore the weight of something deeper than regret. Daniel had written it. He didn't beg. He didn't try to explain. He simply acknowledged what he had done and what he hadn't. "I thought time would fix it," the letter said. "But time doesn't heal silence. It only deepens the distance between what we should have said and what we chose not to." He ended the letter with a wish. "If she's still alive, tell her, I'm sorry. Not for the things I did, but for all the moments I didn't choose her." The organization's director, uncertain of Evelyn's current address and respecting her anonymity, placed the letter in a sealed folder marked confidential. Well, when she saw Evelyn next, during a volunteer gathering, she handed her the envelope. "She might want this," the director had said gently. Evelyn accepted it with a nod. She didn't ask who it was from. She returned to her tea shop that evening and walked to the small room behind the kitchen where she kept her journals, dried herbs, and books of forgotten poetry. She took a thumbtack and pinned the envelope, unopened, to the corkboard above her writing desk. She never touched it again. Lucy asked once, weeks later, "Do you want me to read it to you?" Evelyn smiled and shook her head. "Some stories are more powerful when left untold." The shop continued to thrive, its reputation now something of folklore. People came from neighboring towns just to sit in silence, to sip tea from hand-painted cups, to breathe in the scent of peace. Evelyn remained at the counter, quiet, steady, warm. She became, to many, the face of grace without recognition. Years passed. Lily grew up. She became a young woman who loved libraries and old movies and kept a worn photograph in her journal, a picture of her, age 5, sitting in a kitchen beside a woman whose name she couldn't quite remember. The photo had no label, just the faint scent of cinnamon clinging to its corner. One summer afternoon, Lily visited the lake alone. She'd heard whispers of a tea shop run by a woman with a voice like music and a memory that stretched longer than time. She entered the quiet cup with hesitant steps, greeted by the smell of honeyed mint and soft cello music. Behind the counter stood Evelyn, older now, her hair fully silver but her posture still elegant. She wore a blue scarf around her neck. Lily's eyes widened. Something flickered in her chest, a memory without shape. Evelyn saw her and smiled. "First time here?" "Yes," Lily said, almost breathless. "But have we met before?" Evelyn tilted her head, her eyes kind. "I meet a lot of people. What's your name, dear?" "Lily. Lily Harper." Evelyn's smile didn't falter. "Lovely name." Lily hesitated. Did you ever know a woman named Evelyn Harper?" The silence between them stretched long and soft, like dusk. Then Evelyn replied, "I've heard of her. They say she loved chamomile and used to write poems in the margins of receipts." Lily's shoulders dropped slightly. I think she was someone important to me. I'm just not sure how." Evelyn gently placed a teacup in front of her. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind forgets. Lily sat for hours that day. They spoke of books, of flowers, of music. Evelyn listened more than she spoke. She didn't ask about family. She didn't offer history. When Lily stood to leave, she turned back at the door. "You're sure you're not—" Evelyn shook her head gently. "No, dear. I'm just someone who makes tea." And Lily believed her. She left with a warmth in her chest she couldn't explain, like being hugged by a memory that didn't need a name. Evelyn stood at the window long after Lily was gone, watching the light dance on the lake's surface. She had not been forgotten. She had simply chosen to let go. And in that letting go, she had found herself again, not as a mother unthanked or a woman erased, but as someone who had rewritten her ending, alone, in full color. Not everyone gets a second life, but Evelyn Harper had steeped hers slowly and drank it whole.